What is up, my dashing dudes? I am the Hans TV, and today we find out what kind of revenge happens whenever you only enforce some of the rules. It's r/ProRevenge. Our first post comes from Dark Silver Jessie. I could have been her dream, but I became her nightmare. I don't like the implications of that. Backstory: beware who you meet online. I met my Karen on a gamer's dating site. She said she also had kids. I love kids as a former foster parent. She has 5 kids by 3 guys. Age ranges from 3 to 16. 3 boys and 2 girls. She had sought protection from the YWCA from her ex for being abusive. Playing on my kindness and wanting to protect people, she played my heart for 3 months of occasional sex. In the 3 months leading up to this beginning, I bonded with 4 out of 5 of the kids, to the point they called me dad. The oldest went to visit her dad and chose to stay there. I thought teen angst, but the reality was much worse. May 2018, a normal weekend evening. We were outside her apartment having a cig as we discussed an upcoming court case with the abusive ex over her youngest. While I leaned on the wall, as I always did, nervous habit from being jumped in the past, she got in front of me and dropped to a knee. She asked me to marry her. After 4 failed engagements and me being in my 30s and just wanting to actually have a family, I said yes. We won the court that week, but we knew he wouldn't back down. Her 2 youngest boys went for their month with their dad. 2 weeks later, in front of her sister's family and my family, we got hitched. Yes, it was quick. I know. Now, for the spice. 2 weeks into our marriage, she receives another summons to court for custody of her 3-year-old daughter. I put on my best attitude for calming her down and start going over what we are going to do. A few days later, the Friday before court on Monday, she received another summons for custody of her 2 youngest boys from their father who lives out of state. The law office, however, was the same as the other fathers. Now she's really freaking out. So much she quit her job to stay with the kids. Summer break. I came home from work thinking she was just stressed about court Monday, so I took a shower to clean up. She picks the lock on the bathroom, then proceeds to tell me that a good husband would get rid of those evil men who treated her badly and just wanted to take her kids away. I told her that I was in the shower and we could talk after I was done. She yanks the curtain open and starts hitting me, saying how I didn't care about her or the kids anymore. All of this got my blood boiling. Not only was I pissed about what I had heard about these men and that the judge was even humoring them, given the police records they had, but now I had a screaming, abusive wife in front of me. I'll admit that what I did here was wrong. I'll also admit that I suffer from pseudo-bulbar effect, a disorder that requires me to stay calm or I risk losing control of the emotion. Anger, laughter, sadness, worthlessness, fear, etc. And that I also have nocturnal seizures and a bad knee and hip, hit by a car when I was 13. I demanded to be let out of the bathroom, 8x5 room, so I could calm down, and so she could calm down and so we could talk it out. She locked and blocked the door, demanding I promised to kill her exes or else she wouldn't budge. I put on my shorts so I wouldn't go out in front of the kids naked. I told her move. She began hitting me, saying, "Why won't you promise?" I moved her out from in front of the door, picked her up, and dropped her on the pile of dirty clothes. Anyone with a larger family will understand the pile. As I hobbled to the door trying to calm down, the 2 younger boys, 10 and 9 with autism, started screaming/crying, along with their little sister. The oldest boy, 15, was trying to hold his mother back. She had a towel rod in her hands. He couldn't hold her, and before I could get to the living room to go out the only exit in the apartment, she rushed past, pushed the love seat in front of the door, and stood in front of it. I, being no longer able to hold back the anger, shoved her on the seat and slung it to the side. As I grabbed the handle to go out, she jumped on my back and tried choking me. Little 135-pound woman versus 220-pound male. I flipped her over my shoulder and pinned her to the ground. Later on, she admits that at that moment she feared for her life because I was in a state of dysphoric mania, so angry your eyes turned black, due to hyperdilation of the pupil and blood flooding the lining of the eye. That's when I felt a sharp spike in the back of my head. Common sharp pain just before a seizure. I slammed to the floor, unable to move my body, but still able to look around. I could feel myself drooling. I was having a seizure. She quickly calmed down, realizing what happened to me. She and her oldest went and got neighbors to help get me into the car. Couldn't afford the ambulance to come to me. I spent that night in the hospital. I told her I needed to go stay at my brother's for a couple of days to recoup. Monday rolled around and she left for court without me. She lost custody of her daughter. 2 months roll by, weekend visits with her daughter, new job, boys in football, and I'm their assistant coach. My home, which I was renovating for all of us to be able to stay in, was just about ready to move in. My friend, Kevin, was helping with the repairs along with the boys. Karen would always just sit at the steps in a fold-out chair smoking. We didn't mind, she was with any type of tool. We finally moved into my house. The boys each had their own room, and the girls' room was set up for the weekend visits, and for when the oldest daughter would be spending summer vacay with us. Boys are back in school, and everything was going good. Then, it happened. I get a frantic call at work one day. There was a tow truck in our driveway trying to take her car. I rush home. I know she paid it off because I was there when she would send the Western Union checks to the used car company. They said she was 5 months behind. Bullshit. And that they hadn't received a dime from her since April. Come to find out, her uncle, the one who had sold her the car as a salesman at the car company, had given her his personal address and was cashing the WU checks himself and not applying them to her account. And so began a back and forth of her using my car to take me to work, then she'd go to work, we'd take a lunch break together and swap out. I'd pick her up from work in the evenings. This went on for a month. One day at work, I got sick and got sent home. Boss drove me home as she had my car in the mornings. Didn't think anything of Kevin's truck being in front of the house, as he was one of those friends who would stop by periodically if he had a job in the area. I get inside the house and smell it. The smell of sex. And we hadn't really been passionate throughout our relationship, so the scent was off. But both of them were just sitting on the back step having a cig. So I brushed it off as my mind playing tricks on me. Told my boss what happened, and he gave me the keys to the company truck so I could periodically drop by and make sure everything was alright. Boss is my little brother. Kevin didn't really stick around too long in the evenings. Mainly just friendly chats about work, share a beer, etc, etc. Friend of 19 years, didn't really think he'd break bro code. Who would have seen this coming? About a week after the sick day incident, I decided to stop by her work and surprise her with the Hershey's and a Route 44 Vanilla Coke, Sonic. But she wasn't there. I asked where she was, as she didn't have the car at this time, and the lady behind the counter said she'd quit 2 weeks earlier. Enough, Mr. Nice Guy. She and I shared a cell plan, so I ordered the extra package that allows you to find lost/stolen phones. I did not inform her of this. I tracked her. When she dropped me off at work, she'd go over to Kevin's house, rush back to pick me up for lunch, have me drop her off at her work, then Kevin would come pick her up and go back to his place. He'd bring her back to work and I'd pick her up. I did not let on that I knew, and I saw what she was about to try. I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. I contacted the law office of the 2 attorneys that had filed and were currently filed against her in custody cases, informing them that I may need their services soon, and that if they'd give me a break on the cost, I'd be willing to help them out. I dug deeper into the evil exes, and all the police reports filed against them were filed by my wife. September 31st, 2018, Sunday. Me, Kevin, and Karen are all in the kitchen, having a drink and celebrating the recent legalization of Mary Jane in our state, when I straight up ask her, while she's drunk, "So are y'all f***ing around behind my back?" Knowing good and well that they were. Kevin denied it in a hurry, but Karen, oh Karen, she spilled her little drunk guts about how she'd been seeing Kevin since the week before we got married, and how they planned on conjoining all the debt she'd built up while running from ex to ex. Then she went into a crying fit about the kids and how she loved them, and then tried to go upstairs, now 3 a.m. on Monday morning, to wake them up. She got mad, stripped naked, and tried to go outside. Me and Kevin stopped this. I wouldn't mind her going to jail at this point, but I didn't want the police there that late. The next morning, with her unable to remember what she'd said the night before, I went about my routine, trying to figure out my next step. Lunch rolled around, no ride, texting gets nowhere, and calls go straight to voicemail. I grabbed the CV and went home. quiet. Kids were in school and I figured her and Kevin were off fooling around. Nearly time to go home. I text her asking where she is at with the car. I get a reply from Kevin's number that she's made her choice. She's moving out and that she'll be back later in the week to get her stuff, and that my car was in the driveway at home. I asked about the kids since Kevin lives with his mother and got a "they're not your kids, butt out." Boss takes me home to find her cell on the table, formatted, all her clothes were gone, and a few of my comics, Thor number 2 and Spider-Man 20th Anniversary Edition, were gone. I could tell they left in a hurry after getting the kids because the boys' after-school snacks and homework were still on the table, so too was their football gear. They had practice in an hour. I loaded up their gear and took it to the pitch, gave it to the coach and let him know what was going on. The following day, just after school began, I rushed their backpacks to the school. Didn't know they were in the counselor's office right next to the principal's office where I was dropping off the bags. They were bawling their eyes out, wanting to go home to Dad, but their mom had put a non-contact on me. At work, around 2 p.m., I get a restraining order served to me to stay away from her and the family. Reason? Domestic assault. I had it. I called up the lawyers, gave them every little detail they needed. The boys' fathers were well set. They would be able to provide way more than I could ever. She had kept me in the dark about them. I get informed from my friend at CPS that they've taken the boys from the school as they've gone all week in the same clothes. She was/is living in one of Kevin's uncle's backyard in a camper trailer. We go to court over the restraining order. I win under the request either get the RO and lose her stuff or drop it and come get it. She demanded her stuff, so no more RO. I filed for divorce. She declined. I filed again. Declined again. Then I started getting bills that she consolidated, $5,000 worth of debt. Then she filed for divorce and tried to have me sign a non-appear. I said yes to the divorce, but not to the denial to appear. Me and my lawyer filed marital fraud, infidelity, conspiracy to commit murder on her. The judge said we couldn't properly file the conspiracy to commit murder, but that the district attorney would love to hear it. She was under watch for 2 counts of falsifying a police report charge. Divorce granted, she had 24 hours to get whatever was hers out, and that all the debts she had prior to the marriage were to be returned to her. He gave me the paperwork to give the debt collectors so I wouldn't be responsible anymore, as well as she had to cover all court costs. As my attorney said, it might be a loss financially, but it's still a win for the firm. His firm charged $500 an hour for 3 2-hour court sessions. She never came to get her things. Now, 5 months later, I've seen her once. She went from 135 pounds to about 90 pounds. Kevin is a skeleton too. She has no job, no car, is living out of a camper in someone's backyard with criminal warrants out for her. Oh, and if anyone wants some really nice furniture, I have a few pieces left. Good lord, that was a long one, but my god was it worth it in the end. She got her comeuppance. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, this is going to be the last post for today. This comes from the bad guy below. Selectively enforce the rules? Okay, let's follow them to the letter now. I used to work for a manufacturing company who makes waste containers, dumpsters, and such. And at first, it was a good job with a good manager and no problems. I enjoyed the work. It was dirty, physically demanding job, but kept me in good shape. I could just put in my earbuds and cruise through the day without any issues. My initial job was to prep the units for painting by polishing imperfections with a sander and grinding down the areas that were too rough, as well as cleaning them up after the welders were done with them. But after a while, they kept laying off so many people and jumping their jobs on me that eventually towards the end of my time there, I was quality control, helped the painter, was a warehouse man, finisher, grinder, and also a janitor, for no additional pay beyond the small cost of living raises we got once in a while. After about a year of working for this company, prior to having all these jobs dumped on me without any issues, new management showed up, and as they like to do, they started making all kinds of changes just for the sake of making changes. Things that made jobs harder with no benefit, cutting corners that should not be cut, and generally hurting productivity and workplace safety. The change in management was bad, but it was not the end of the world. It made things harder for no real reason, but all in all, things were still manageable. until I ended up off work for about a month with a collapsed lung that I still to this day believe was caused by working conditions there and lack of ventilation and personal protective equipment. When I came back to work, I was on light duty for quite some time since I had surgery to repair the lung and prevent it from collapsing again. I went from the golden boy who they called on when shit had to get done to the redheaded stepchild of the company. And management was doing everything they could to get me to quit. They would throw away my tools, hide my stools so I couldn't use them while I was working, hassle me over things like my earbuds, citing safety as why I couldn't use them, even though OSHA themselves told me it was not an issue. The production manager would lie about things and write me up for non-existent violations, refused to fix my bay doors that had been crashed into by forklifts numerous times that had to be closed and opened with a crowbar by 2 people since the track was mangled. Other things include the company giving everybody in the plant raises except for me, catching me 5 minutes before leaving work to go on my weekend and informing me that we had to work the next day, and selectively enforcing safety rules, and even making rules up on the fly. After about 6 months, I had had enough and decided that if they wanted to constantly cite policy and safety rules to fuck with me, then I could play that game too. I would make this manufacturing plant the safest company on the planet and ensure policy was followed to the exact letter. This was now my mission. I began to slow my work way down and only do the jobs I was hired and paid to do, instead of doing the workload of 10 employees with nothing in return. They now got exactly 1 person's worth of labor out of me. Customers' orders began stacking up, deliveries were late, bad welds and welds that got missed during production were overlooked, causing the units to have to be repainted when they had to go back to the welding lines to be fixed. The warehouse became a wreck with containers backed up to the point that people did not even have room to work. I went from completing a large unit in 30 minutes to it taking me 2.5 hours on the same one, not to mention all the repairs that needed done that were missed during production when before I would have caught them before the units even left the production line. Other petty things I did, including not showing on Saturday to work when the manager would catch me at the last second and tell me I had to. I took to cutting out the text in the employee handbook, citing that working unscheduled hours required management to notify you 3 days in advance, and leaving a letter with that portion of the handbook on his desk the following Monday. There was nothing they could do since I was following the handbook to the letter. At this point, it was a game of who would blink first. They could lay me off and I could draw unemployment on them, or I would quit. Next on the list was safety. They like to hassle me so much about trivial things that I figured they would appreciate me going through the plant and documenting every single last OSHA violation, safety violation, and anything else that was not right. I had a notebook that was filled with violations, from one end of the plant to another. Things like crane lifts that were being used improperly with J-hooks that OSHA previously warned the company about. The same J-hooks they like to hide every time OSHA came through the plant. Welders that had frayed cords around puddles of water. Tools being left on tops of units that could fall off and hit someone. Lack of ventilation. Particle counts that were too high. Forklifts that were not serviced enough. I tagged out equipment that technically shouldn't be used in its current state and locked out the forklifts that needed brakes or any sort of maintenance. Eventually, the production manager took the bait and untagged one of the forklifts I had locked out due to having bad brakes. Anybody who knows lockout procedure can understand what a massive up that is. Once I compiled my list of improvements, I went to the government official who was overseeing safety and procedure since we often worked on government orders. I gave him my notebook, informed him of my manager taking the lockout off of a defective forklift, then went on break and waited. About 30 minutes later, I saw my manager walking back from the head office, looking pissed beyond belief. Later, I heard from someone who knows him that he got punished severely, especially for the forklift. From then on, he avoided me and wouldn't even speak to or look at me. After that, I continued to slow my work pace down and got a bit of satisfaction each day from the complete show the place had become, and how backed up it was every single day. After I left the company, I heard they hired 5 guys to do my job and that they still did a job at it. Had they treated me better instead of coming at me like they did, they would have been still getting the top quality of work from me that they got when I first joined them, and things would have went along just fine. I can't even imagine how much money I must have cost that company by sticking to the exact letter of the rule. Well, alright my dashing dudes, I know that there was only a couple stories in this one today, but it turned out to be a pretty long telling of ProRevenge. If you like the stories. I'll link them down in the description as always. If you liked the video, go ahead and drop a like, a sub, and a comment down below what you'd like to see me read next. I don't know if y'all like these super long videos like this, or if you'd prefer me to just do the 10 to 15 minute videos that I normally do, or maybe just do maybe some days do 10 to 15, maybe do 20 some days. Leave a comment down below with what you'd like to see me do. But with that being said, thank you to everyone that has subscribed to me in the past few weeks. It is so gracing and humbling to know that you guys are liking what I'm doing. And I'm doing this for you, my dashing dudes. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video.